There's hardly a day that goes by where I don't hear from somebody who's in the middle of a breakup or a divorce and they share some emotions or some situation that they're experiencing. And they would ask me if I've ever encountered that before or if I've ever heard from anybody else that's had something similar. And really, what they're telling me is that they're feeling crazy at that moment. And they want reassurances that even though they feel crazy, that they're not crazy. And whenever I tell them, oh my goodness, that is so normal, I hear this all the time, I always hear this exhale, this relief of like, oh my goodness, I'm not the only one. It's not just me. Maybe I'm not crazy after all. So here are 6 of the more common experiences that I hear about that people worry are somehow abnormal, but they're actually quite common. So one of the first ones is a sense of what I call mania after divorce. And this is usually pretty early on in the experience, and it can be quite intense. In fact, sometimes a little bit scary. And it's this sense of, I'm okay. It's almost a teenage sense of recklessness and invulnerability. It's like I've faced the worst and I made it, and now anything can happen. And you can have this really strong energy and this desire to just go out and do all the things and, experience life and just take everything and just devour it all. And one of the things that where I often hear people talk about this is that people in their circles are sometimes concerned about them because they're saying, you're different, you're not the same you. And sometimes the choices you can make when you're feeling this mania can be a little borderline dangerous. Sometimes people go out and, start drinking too much, or maybe are dating quite a bit without too much concern for themselves or for their own safety. But at its core, though, that mania is extremely, extremely common. One of the things that I like to compare it to is, those spring snakes in the canister. And, maybe in the last few years of your relationship, that's how you felt. You were feeling constrained and constricted. And now all of a sudden, you're released. And it's kind of that little bit of going crazy. The good thing about this phase is it doesn't last. It's going to be temporary. While you're in this phase, though, take advantage of that extra energy that you have and make sure that you're also doing some things that are good for you while you've got that extra energy. Another common thing that people worry about is they find themselves overreacting to situations. And I'm going to share a really silly one of mine. I've written quite a bit about all of my myriad overreactions. I'm quite good at it. But one that I remember very early on is I had gone on this few dates with this guy, and I was over at his house for the first time, and in the guest bathroom I noticed a bottle of Drakkar Noir, and I had a complete and total freak out. Not because of anything against Drakkar, not that I particularly love it, but that happened to be one of the scents that my ex-husband would wear. And so when I saw that, I reacted completely irrationally. And I'm sure that guy thought that I was totally nuts, that I was so upset about, some bottle in his bathroom. But the reality, of course, is I wasn't really reacting to that. I was reacting to being reminded of all the early memories with my ex-husband and had, refelt all of that betrayal and everything else. And that kind of situation is really, really common. You're going to have situations that completely and totally trigger you. And often in the moment, you don't even realize that you're not reacting to something at that point. You think you are, but in the reality, you're reacting to something that happened quite a long time ago. And you definitely can feel crazy in those moments because you are a little bit out of control. You're coming from a very emotional point, not from a rational point at all. But again, completely and totally normal. And the good news is that the more you go through those exposures, the better you're going to get at how to handle them. A third common situation that I hear about is where somebody enters into a new relationship relatively soon after a breakup or divorce, and they go into that feeling very hopeful. It feels wonderful and amazing and all of the things that they didn't have in their former relationship. And so they get really excited about it and they put a lot of hope into it. And often, and sadly, most of the time, those early relationships end up not quite going the distance. They tend to fade relatively quickly, sometimes months, sometimes even years. But often there's issues there that haven't been fully resolved that end up surfacing. And I frequently hear from people not after their major breakup, after their divorce or breakup of several years, but after this somewhat fling has ended and their emotions are extremely intense and they equate that intensity with, well, maybe that second relationship, that rebound relationship really was real and authentic, and it was that was my soulmate, and the only way that I could feel as badly as I do now is if that was somehow some really big loss. But what actually often happens is that early work of grieving the divorce didn't actually happen. Because instead they distracted themselves by going into this new relationship. And so when that second one ends, you're not only feeling the end of that, but you're also finally feeling the end of the major relationship or the divorce. And so it's sort of that compounded and delayed grief that all compiles on at one time and leaves you feeling really low, often even lower than you did post-divorce. So this fourth one is specific to people that had bad exes for one reason or another, infidelity, abuse, abandonment. And they'll start off by detailing all of the reasons that their ex is or was a horrible person and a bad fit for them. And then they'll follow up by saying, but I still miss them. And what's interesting is there's often quite a bit of shame with that experience or with that emotion because they think that there's something wrong with them since here's this person that isn't good for them and yet they're still longing for them. And that's completely normal. You know, no one person is all good or all bad. And of course you're going to miss the good parts of them. Plus you're also going to miss the familiarity that you had with them. And one of the ones I really experience a lot is missing that shared history, you know, and that's something you're not going to be able to build with somebody else. So again, though, this is one of those that does tend to fade with time, especially as you meet new people and you find others in your life that have some of those same strengths, but that aren't counteracted by some of those pretty horrendous weaknesses. So let that shame go. It's normal to miss them. The important thing, though, is that you don't have to act upon that feeling of missing them. The fifth one that I frequently hear about is self-doubt. I work with a lot of people who are, by all metrics, extremely successful in life. You know, professionally, they're well known. They win awards. They are amazing parents, children, you know, everything else. But in their romantic lives, they feel defeated, you know, after going through divorce or breakup, and they feel like they failed. And part of that then is this little niggling voice that starts in their head telling them, do you really know what you're doing? Are you making the right choices? Or maybe it's more critical and saying, you know, you suck at this. You're never going to have a good relationship. And this is one of those, when I hear it on one hand, I relate. It also breaks my heart, and it's always interesting hearing it from somebody else, because from my outside perspective, I can see, you know, how that voice really isn't accurate, and, you know, it's really just their fears speaking. But I know when I've had that voice within myself, it certainly doesn't feel like fear talking. It feels accurate, and so it's so easy to listen to. And the reality is that you're undertaking some, you know, new roads right now. And of course you're going to feel unsure about things. So a certain amount of self-doubt is completely and totally normal. Also though, recognize that that voice, that fear, it's good at lying to you. It's gonna always tell you the worst and expect you to listen. And the thing is that oftentimes that's not really what's going on. So yeah, self-doubt's gonna be there. Best way to get through it is just to keep taking action. The only true way to build confidence is to create some challenges for yourself or take advantage of the ones that are thrown in your lap. And as you beat those challenges, you really start to feel better. And the final situation that I hear about all the time is I'll talk to somebody who's a little bit out from the divorce, maybe months away, sometimes even years away. And they'll talk to me about their progress thus far, and they'll detail this lovely linear path where, every week or every month they got just a little bit better, a little bit better, a little bit better. And then they'll tell me about something that happened. One of the more common ones that I hear about is that the ex got remarried or got engaged or is having a child, something like that. And all of a sudden, the person contacting me finds that they are what they feel is back at the beginning. And they get really frustrated because, hey, I was making all this progress and now all of a sudden I feel, Chutes and Ladders style, like I'm back where I started. And one of my favorite things to say is that healing is not linear. It might feel that way for a short period of time. For the extremely lucky, maybe it stays that way all the time, but I haven't met one of those people yet. So there's going to be setbacks. There's going to be times where you sort of plateau and you're staying in that same point for quite a while. And that again is completely and totally normal. And the good thing with this too is even if you take a big step back, you're going to find that it's a lot easier to get, where you've been than it was the first time through, because it becomes familiar. You start to learn, oh, okay, I've been here before. I felt this way before. It didn't kill me, even though it felt like it was going to. It didn't kill me. And, I remember how I got through this last time. I'll try some of those same things again. And you just get better at it. It becomes more familiar. And before you know it, even with all those crazy zigzags and shoots back to the beginning, you find that you do end up making progress, even though it wasn't quite the neat climb that you expected. So there you have it. Those are 6 things that may make you feel crazy after divorce, but those are also 6 things that are incredibly, incredibly normal. So welcome to the club.